Okay, we are live. This is Jeff Hasley with Carolina Fandom, and today I've got a special show to share with you, Carolina Panthers fans, about the draft picks that we just recently had. I've got Shane P. Hallam, NFL draft analyst. He is with FakePigskin.com, as well as does work for DraftSite and SteelCityInsider. Shane, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on here. And how you been doing?
I'm doing good, man, Jeff. The draft was great. I love it every year. It's super exciting. So I'm just happy to we finally have it out of the way too, and we can start breaking these things down, seeing where these teams are going to go. This is such a fun time, even post draft, just looking at everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm excited to get into some of these picks. But before we do that, I just kind of want to let the audience know, let the viewers know here a little bit about you. You recently participated in well, actually, you've done this multiple times, the Huddle Report Top 100 contest. And to tell us a little bit about that before we share the news on how well you did.
Yeah, so every year the Huddle Report and Robbie Esch there does a great job with this and does it for free out of the kindness of his heart. We'll invite analysts to submit they have a mock draft contest. You submit your first round mock draft and it's kind of graded on a certain point system. And then the big one's kind of the top 100 that analysts can list their top 100 players in the draft. And if they get picked in the top 100, you get a point, and whoever has the most picked in the top 100 wins the contest.
Got it. Okay, so you have to pick these players, and you're saying that these players are going to be drafted in the top 100, right? And whoever has the most wins the contest. Is that right?
Correct.
And you've done this how many times? How many years?
I've been doing it consistently since 2014. So
okay,
this was year 6.
Right. And guys, just so you're aware, Shane wound up picking 86 correct out of 100. Is that right?
Yeah. 86 out of 100, my highest ever.
86 out of 100, and that was the top number, and that's against all of these draft analysts and experts, your Mel Kipers, your Todd McShays, your Lance Zierleins, your you can mention others too, but I mean there's a lot of people. Anyone that we think of when it comes to the draft, you beat in this contest. So congrats on that. That's a huge statement win there.
No, thanks. It's exciting. You put so much time into these guys, try to figure out who you think's going to go in that top 100 and predict it. But getting one more correct, then Mel Kiper, then Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, like just seeing kind of your name up there. Bob McGinn of The Athletic, he's won 5 times. He's very dialed in inside. So, yeah, I mean, it was down to the wire. I think the 97th pick for the Browns, Jacob Phillips, I had in my top 100. Very few others did. And then Matt Pierce at 99 to the Giants was the winning pick. That was the last one. I don't think anyone had Tanner Muse. So it worked out really well. So I'm excited by that. And, it feels like the work kind of paid off, right?
Yeah. Hey, well, congrats to you. And also, guys, not only is Shane an NFL draft expert and analyst, he's also a school teacher, teaches social studies. So he's a man of many talents. And, we're proud to have you on here. Everybody who's here listening, thank you for joining us. And let's get into some of these picks. First of all, every single pick went to the defense. And that's never been done before in NFL history, which is surprising, actually. It can either be one or the other, right? I mean, I'm surprised that hasn't happened. Do you know if that's happened on the other side, on the offensive side?
I don't think so. I'd be kind of surprised if it's ever happened, either way. So this is a unique draft for sure.
I kind of wonder if it was a statement that Carolina made saying, you know what, hey, we need defense. Our defense was horrible last year, 4th worst rushing defense in terms of rushing yards allowed per game, 143.5. Second most in terms of points allowed. So they had to make a move, especially with all the players that they lost. Once they got to like the 5th round, they're probably thinking, well, let's do defense again. And then the 7th round, let's make it a clean sweep here. Let's do this. But all right, so let's get into these picks. I want you to talk to us a little bit about each one of these picks and what you think of them, what their strengths and weaknesses are. How are they going to fit in with the Panthers system, their defensive system, since they're all defense, and maybe a couple comparisons, that kind of thing. So let's start with the first round pick, seventh overall, Derrick Brown out of Auburn. Talk to us a little bit about Derrick Brown, the player, who he reminds you of, and why is he such a great fit here in Carolina?
Well, first, I think it's a real steal to get him at 7. I thought that was an excellent pick. It's who I have him taking in my mock draft. I mean, this is a player in Derrick Brown who was, to me, almost a 1B of defensive players in this draft. I mean, Chase Young was clearly number 1, but I think in a lot of years, Derrick Brown would have been the number 1 defensive player, maybe the number 1 player in the draft. He really was that good. I mean, he's big, he's violent, he can penetrate. The one thing I really like about him is he kind of has strength on both ends. He has that upper body strength. He can push you around, but he also has great lower body strength and kind of drive and move. So you can get kind of the driving, pushing strength, but you also have that upper body just to move offensive linemen out of the way, with his arms and his hands. So I think there's a lot to really like about him from both sides. He's great against the run. He fills his gaps really, really well. He has an obscene number of tackles for loss in his career. And this past season, 11 and a half was just outstanding. Most of them coming in the SEC, most of them coming against the better competition. This wasn't a guy that feasted on those poor teams, that you play out of conference. So that's exciting to me. The kind of the weaknesses, why wasn't he number 2 was, he plays a bit high and tight. And I think it's honestly going to be a common theme with a lot of these picks. It seems like the weakness that the Panthers didn't care too much about is, defensive lineman or linebacker kind of playing high. And sometimes that pad level rises up. So offensive lineman can kind of get underneath, hold you back a little bit. Now, luckily, Derrick Brown has the length. He has those long arms that's not usually an issue for him, but, that could be a problem. I honestly, especially when there were key third downs, key fourth down plays, that's where I kind of saw his technique kind of break down, and he played the highest. I think he was pushing a little bit. So that might be something he's coached out. And the other weakness is just little things like, when the play gets past him, sometimes he'll give up on it, and the running back, when you're a defensive tackle, that's fairly common. Most defensive tackles in this draft aren't trying to run upfield and make tackles, but there's very little kind of downside to him. And I'm kind of excited to come on here and talk about the defense because I watched Baylor a ton this past year. They had 2 defensive tackles drafted. So I know exactly what Derrick Brown's going to be doing in this defense because I watched so much of it. If Phil Snow plays kind of a multiple scheme where you have 4-3 at times, 3-4 at times. And I think he's going to kind of play the James Lynch role who got drafted by the Vikings. Now he played basically 3 different positions on the defense. They had him play a 3 technique often in the 4-3. And you also saw Lynch at times play a 5 technique or a 0 or 1. So nose tackle or kind of a 3-4 defensive end. I think Derrick Brown's versatility in this system is what gives what fits so well, is because he can do all those things. He can do them much better than James Lynch can even. And James Lynch had a ton of production at Baylor in that position. So I think you're going to see Derrick Brown play at end, play between the guard and tackle. You're going to see him play head up with the center. You're going to see him play in the 3 tech and be able to penetrate. He reminds me of Fletcher Cox. Is probably my big comparison for him. So, I think he's going to be a plug and play player. You're going to see pressure numbers. You're going to see tackles for loss. I think he's a player, even if you don't see the big sack numbers, you don't see maybe he has 2 tackles in the game, or 1 tackle for loss. That's not a good pick. I think he's one of those players that changes the way an offense has to run, pressures the quarterback, gets them out of the pocket, breaks the play down. Maybe Brian Burns makes a play instead. Those are the kind of things that are going to happen with him.
Yeah, and also too, just because he may not get a forced fumble or a fumble recovery, he could get penetration and he could get a quarterback hit, or he could just cause the quarterback to make an errant throw or a poor decision, and that right there is next down. So I mean that's what we're looking for out of this draft pick, and a lot of people are curious. You mentioned Fletcher Cox. That's a great comparison if it holds out to be true, because Fletcher has been outstanding in his career. Would you say that he's got the opportunity for a Pro Bowl year one? Is he a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate? What would you say there?
I think it's possible, just because the scheme does lend to a lot of penetration from this position, right? So, like for a defensive tackle to win Rookie of the Year, probably as a rookie to go to the Pro Bowl, you're going to need some numbers for people to really key on, right? Aaron Donald is an example. And I think with the multiple scheme, I think we'll see him play some of that 3-4 end, and that's a possibility. So, I'm not going to put money on it. I wouldn't put money on any defensive tackle winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, but I think he is definitely a candidate.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you don't really see too many of those. Maybe Aaron Donald, I think, got it, and maybe Warren Sapp if you're going back that far. But that's great. That's good to hear. I'm sure Panthers fans love to hear that. I mean, we've fallen in love with the player in terms of his highlight reel and watching his motor run. The guy could be a menace on the field, and it's exciting to know that he's going to be on our side, especially for a defense that is sorely lacking. So he's a big pick there, and we're looking forward to that. So, all right, how about moving on to the next pick? Now, Carolina has had 2 picks in the second round because they traded their 3rd round pick to move up, but their first pick in the second round at pick 38, Itur Gross-Matos. And Trey Wingo really butchered that name over the weekend, did Anyway, talk to us a little bit about him, because, we're all familiar with SEC player and, Derrick Brown. He's gotten a lot of publicity, but we may not know so much about this Penn State product and, how he fits in. What can we expect out of him? Talk to us a little bit about him, his pluses, minuses, pros, cons. That kind of thing. So what do you make out of this pick, first of all, and then also the player?
I really love the pick. I had him graded as a late first round pick. I think he deserved to go that high. It seemed like the pass rushers fell down a little bit, and the edge guys, and this is kind of reaping the benefits for the Panthers. So, you look at just the basic outline of him. I think you see what you can like when he's 6'5" and 256. He's big, he's long, his arms are incredibly long, and he's really strong with some nice athletic ability to boot. He's not an elite athlete, but for his size, he's a very good athlete, especially kind of in the box and rushing the passer. So there's some similarities, kind of a typing here to Derrick Brown, to get these guys that are big, that are strong, that are long, that can keep offensive linemen off of them and get some penetration that way. So, he's one of those players that when you watch him at Penn State, you rarely see him get like stonewalled, that an offensive lineman or a tight end or a pulling guard just hits him and backs him up. Gross-Matos is going to fight with those players, and he's going to get past them at some point, right? Like he's one of those guys that are pretty tenacious, and because of that size and strength, it's really hard to keep him down. You're not going to. I didn't see anyone completely overwhelm him. I think a lot of his issues, like we talked about Derrick Brown, he's a guy that plays really high. He's a guy that, he's kind of high cut and will stand a little more upright. There definitely were some games that he didn't have a ton of production, where it was very clear that teams that kind of scouted him said, hey, get under those pads and, just reach for that. And you can kind of force him to try to have to use that length. And you really kind of lose the strength base when you're not close to that offensive lineman. So I think that's probably, the big thing. Once again, might be something the Panthers don't think is a big issue. I think seeing some of these players now, I think there's some coachable issues that can be improved. The use of his hands. Sometimes he just kind of tries to use that power, just grab and go, and he gets a little bit too crabby and doesn't, fully utilize the skill set that he has because he's just kind of grabbing guys and trying to move them around instead of actually, using his hands, punching a little bit better. But I'll tell you, when you get a guy this big, this long, and this athletic, it's just really hard to keep him in. And when you have someone like this, he has such range against the run too. I think that's definitely a positive. He's really good at securing the edge. Making sure that if running back's going off tackle, that there's a number of plays that he's had where he just reaches out those long arms, man, and disrupts that running back. That running back goes down when it could have been 10 yards, 15 yards. So I'm really excited for him too, because I think he's, when I graded him as kind of this base 4-3 end, prototypical player. And I think it'll be interesting to see with kind of the multiple system that the Panthers are going to run, what they do with him when they move to that 3-4, because I think he can play 5 tech, and that's probably what they'll do. You probably plug him in the 5 technique, let Derrick Brown do a little bit more in the nose tackle position. Right. But he can stand up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they just switch things up or even switch things pre-snap and have him stand up or have him stand close to the line. I think he's such a versatile piece.
So a couple questions to add here that I'm looking for you to answer. One, he was arguably the top defensive end in the draft, right? Or at least one or two. How would you compare him to, say, and this is kind of a lesser class in terms of defensive ends and edge rushers, but how would you compare him with some of the players that went last year or previous classes? What are we talking about here? When I see his size, and when I say size, I mean height, I kind of see a little bit of Jason Taylor in there, as far as characteristics are concerned. Now, Jason Taylor's a Hall of Famer. When he came out, though, he was thin and he wasn't quite, where he finished. But do you see any similarities there? And who can you picture as a comparison?
No, I don't think it's a bad comparison in terms of their body size and some of the things that Jason Taylor did in the NFL. I think Gross-Matos did in college. Like, I think that's really possible. I mean, I think he would have been in that end of the first round mix last year too. I think it's kind of similar positioning. I probably had graded less than Montez Sweat, but higher than LJ Collier, who both went in the first round. My comparison for him is just kind of a taller Everson Griffin, a player that's currently in the NFL. Sure. I think he plays very similarly to that. Everson Griffin had some really good years where I don't think Gross-Matos is going to be the guy, right? I think the hope, my guess, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the guess for the Panthers is that Brian Burns will be that pass rusher and that Gross-Matos can be that complementary piece that, hey, you better attribute for on the other side, or, they might end up on the same side and it's going to be really hard to block. I think Everson Griffin kind of did that for Danielle Hunter and maybe a little taller version of that. But I think a Jason Taylor upside is what it is. So, I think he might have a little bit of a slow start. I think there's a couple raw elements to him, but he's a player, from everything I've heard, is super in the books and a really lover of football and the game, and he's going to do everything he can to be really good. So I expect to really see that potential blossom by the end of his rookie year.
Yeah, and just looking at his college stats, the last 2 years, well, he played 3 years at Penn State. The last 2 years, he had 34.5 tackles for a loss and 17 sacks. I mean, that's excellent against Big Ten teams. But it's the DNA is changing for the Panthers defense as we speak. With this draft, a big part of that. And Brian Burns is kind of like the Von Miller type, and these others are complementary pieces, and I can definitely see that. I can see him growing, but he's got a great frame. I think, with some coaching and, like what you said, just development, I think he's going to be a big player for us. So, I mean,
if you, I'll say the Ohio State game this past year was probably his best game. I mean, they had, Jonah Jackson that pulled against Gross-Matos at a point, was drafted in the top 100. I mean, he dominated him. Like, you know, I mean, there's some domination of some NFL players and future NFL players. Like he's played against top competition and done it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's great. You know, I'm definitely looking forward to watching this team play. And you know, of course, we appreciate your critique and your opinion. And those of us who are just joining, we're joined by Shane P. Hallam of FakePigskin.com, and he's talking to us about our Panthers picks. One player who a lot of people are pretty high about right now, and especially in the you know, Panther Nation here, is the player that they traded up for at the end of the second round, where they traded their third round pick and the fifth round pick that they got from the Kyle Allen trade from Washington. And that was to take Jeremy Chin, the safety out of Southern Illinois. And a lot of people are talking about his versatility, how he's kind of like a lighter version of Isaiah Simmons, who was obviously a target for Carolina. And some people were a little bit concerned, we didn't get Simmons, but we got Brown. Jeremy Chin is Simmons-like, isn't he? Talk to us a little bit about Jeremy Chin, what you think of the pick, and the player and how he can fit in year one and beyond.
I'm a fan. You know, I had him rated above Kyle Duggar, who the Patriots took from Lenore-Ryan. I thought they were both, you know, good selections around that spot. But I thought Jeremy Chin offered a little more versatility, and that's really what he brings to the game. You know, you mentioned Isaiah Simmons, right? That's kind of the calling card. Hey, this guy could play linebacker and slot corner and safety. Jeremy Chin played all those things at Southern Illinois. And this isn't a pushover program. This is one of the best, you know, non-FBS programs in the country. So he's actually playing against his good competition and was, you know, just all over the field. Like they clearly knew that he was the best defender that they had. And so they were going to put him in whatever position they could to, you know, to produce. And a lot of it was interceptions. You know, his goal in college was to get picks. He has great ball skills. And so they're really going to put him in position to do that. So, you know, when you watch Southern Illinois, you know, he mostly played safety. But there are snaps at cornerback. There are snaps at linebacker. I know there were some teams that had him rated as a linebacker. That's what they would play him as. So I think it was definitely different depending on what you do. He's such a fast kind of downhill runner. One of the things I really loved about him, and honestly why I graded him so highly, was his angle of pursuits is so good. I mean, that's a feel thing. You know, when you're chasing a running back, you know, that's coming at you, to take the right angle to get that player, that's a really tough thing to coach. You know, it's hard to simulate that. He's someone that does that really well. I thought, you know, he never took too wide or too tight of an angle and missed a guy. It was very, very rare from him. So I think there's a lot of good instincts there.
Yeah. If I could just interject, Panther fans know all about safeties who take poor angles. You don't have to go very far in the fan base to find someone who believes that. Anyway, sorry. Please continue.
No, so hopefully this can fix some of those issues for sure. One would hope. But and I also think he's really good at shedding blocks, you know, even against guys that are bigger than him. You know, he does really well at using his hands, using that first step in athletic ability. So when he played linebacker, right, a lot of times your safety playing linebacker, the offensive lineman's going to eat you up. But I mean, he was so kind of athletic and quick. It was very good. And I think he's going to get interceptions. I think that's going to be a place you can play him at. You know, I honestly would, if it was me, you know, I'm in Pittsburgh, I would kind of use him like a Troy Polamalu and let him freelance a little bit. Mm-hmm. You might make a mistake there, here and there, but he has such good instincts and a nose for the ball. I think he's going to, you know, step in front of routes and use that athletic ability. I think it'll be such a fun way to use him. So, you know, kind of the weaknesses, things to improve on. He could be a little bit slow in terms of reaction time, you know, of the ball coming out of the quarterback's hands and reading and reacting. I think that's something that can come with time, something that comes with experience. So some of that football intelligence work in terms of coverage, I think is something that can get better. Not that he's a bad coverage player. He has that athletic ability, but there are definitely times where he doesn't react as quick to the ball and the receiver and the route as he needs to. His tackle technique could use some work. He definitely, will duck the head and go for the tackle and miss some tackles that way. Mm-hmm. But once again, like Gross-Matos, I think a lot of coachable weaknesses, and it's not things that aren't coachable. And so I think if Matt Rhule and company come in and say, hey, we can coach these guys up, and if you have a good coach there, I think you can fix that. So I'm really excited about him. I think Panthers fans rightfully should be because there's a ton of upside here for him.
Yeah, and to get him almost in the third round, that's great. Did you have a first round grade on him, or where was your grade level for Chin?
I had him as a top 50 early second round pick, so I think it was good value for sure.
Gotcha. Any specific comparison that you can think of? I mean, it's kind of difficult to evaluate different safeties, especially now. We haven't really seen him, but is there a potential type of player that he reminds you of?
Yeah, I'll say a current player he reminds me of is Jaquiski Tart for the 49ers, a guy that kind of is technically one position, but you see him go down at the line, you see him play strong safety, you see him play free safety. I think Chin kind of reminds me of him. I think that could be if I want to say kind of a prediction of how he'll be, right? I think there's much more upside there. I think there's much more downside there, but I think, if you get a rock solid starter like Tart that makes some big plays in the secondary, I think that can definitely be Chin.
Well, that's what we're all hoping for sure. And we think it's a great pick. We're excited about the player. So awesome. Appreciate the feedback. How about going into the next pick? And now they didn't have a third rounder because they traded up. So this is their fourth round pick. They finally selected a cornerback because we know they needed one, right? They selected Troy Pride Jr. out of Notre Dame, another player who's played all 4 years. He'll be 22 years old when he enters the season, provided the season starts on time. But here's a guy. He's got speed. And we all know that speed is important as a corner, but what exactly is Carolina getting here out of Troy Pride? And, what's his upside? What does he need to work on? And can he be a contributor right away? Is this something that he would probably need to, develop on before he finds the field full time? Where are we with Troy Pride? And talk a little bit about the pick.
I think Troy Pride has as much upside as almost any corner in the third or fourth round. I mean, he's a big guy who's extremely fluid. His hips play very loose. He's really good at turning and running, kind of straight line. But I think he's a bit of a project in terms of getting him to the level you want for a cover corner. I mean, there are some games where he, got beat pretty consistently. A lot of it was a mental aspect, that one of the things that kind of aggravated me about him, for example, is he would just give such a cushion, even in the end zone, even in the red zone. And once again, coachable things. You have a player that is big, that has speed, that's fluid. Those are hard things to get. Troy Pride has all those things. Now it's about teaching him how to get a little physical, how to tackle, how to, kind of jam at the line. And I think those are things that he really needs to work on. So, I kind of view him as a little bit more of a project. I think the first three players, rock solid, day one, put them on the field, let them do their thing. I think Pride is a player you want to kind of bring along slowly a little bit, teach him how to play. He doesn't have much in terms of ball skills, but if he could be a starter. I mean, he's big. He can match up with any receiver in the NFL with that size and athletic ability. But if he can get tougher, get better at reading receivers' routes, double moves were the bane of his existence. I mean, there are a number of double moves he got beat for touchdowns. So I think this is kind of the project pick, right? Here's kind of a pet project for this defense. If you can bring this guy along, I mean, he could be really, really good. But he's going to need some time, in my opinion.
Yeah, it kind of seems like that with cornerbacks outside of tight end. I would say corner may be the next position that, kind of requires a little bit more time and development before you can really kind of show your stuff and, kind of strut your stuff a little bit. We saw that with Josh Norman in Carolina. It took him a couple of years before he turned into the Josh Norman that we know. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, speed is important. That's good, and he has that. He said that he had like a 4.4 40, and I think he said in a comment that like 9 times out of 10 he runs a 4.3. So that's whatever. Take that for what it's worth. But he's had 4 interceptions in his college career. Not a whole lot, right? So he's not necessarily that ball hawking corner like you mentioned, or that he's not, right? But hey. He is what he is at this point, and he's on the team, and I'm sure he's going to do what he can to improve, and we're looking forward to that. So, all right, this next pick, I want to talk to you, definitely get your opinion on it because you're kind of familiar with his game and his story, and that's Kenny Robinson, the safety out of West Virginia. People who, if you don't know the story, he was with West Virginia for his freshman and sophomore year. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that right? And I guess there was an issue where he had committed academic fraud. I guess one of his friends did an assignment for him or something. Anyway, and he was kicked out of school. And there's a whole long story about his mother having a stroke is really important in his life, and that he was more focusing on that than he was school, and this all happened, blah, blah, blah. But the long of the short here is that, he's overcoming his mistakes, and instead of going back to school, which he couldn't do, he decided to play for the XFL, for the St. Louis Battlehawks, and wound up doing pretty well there. And he used that kind of as a jump start to get into the NFL draft. He wasn't eligible for the combine, so no one really kind of knew other than what his game was in the XFL. So that's the story, and you could probably talk a little bit more about it because you're from the Pittsburgh area, and so is he. But talk to us a little bit about the player that he was at West Virginia. What are we talking about here? Did he have like a first round type of projection until all of this happened? What was his experience like in the XFL, and what can Panthers fans expect out of this guy? And tell us what you think about the pick and the player. I'll stop talking.
No, you're good. No, it's actually interesting because I actually saw him play in high school. He's from Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, went to a Mount Christian high school, was a really good player, stayed kind of local to go to West Virginia, to go to WVU. I think we were talking about a top 2-round player when you have someone that's 6'2", 200, that was really, really good at intercepting passes. He single-handedly won them his sophomore year game against Texas Tech. They won by a touchdown. He had 2 picks, 1 return for long yardage, and tons of tackles. He was someone you did not want to see over the middle. He's just a really good player. You thought, okay, this guy could be the top safety next year. It's a possibility. And then, his mother had a stroke, then had colon cancer. And he was kind of traveling back and forth from Pittsburgh to WVU, and it was supposed to attend a funeral, had a friend turn in a paper for him. Well, he was supposed to be at a team meeting when the paper was turned in, and he wasn't even on campus, so it kind of flagged the school, and they kicked him out. So I think the XFL was the best thing that happened to him, because I think you hear that, maybe we don't take him, try to sign him as an undrafted free agent, but then playing in the XFL, and I watched a couple games of his in the XFL, it was pretty clear that this is a player that's much better than most of the players on that field. And he was a lot younger than some of them, but clearly, just from an athletic ability standpoint, this is a player that belongs in the NFL. I think I think there are a couple guys that end up getting signed. There are a bunch of XFL players that got signed, but I think a couple guys like PJ Walker, who the Panthers signed a quarterback, the other one. I think Robinson and him are probably the two that I was like, these guys should be in the NFL. They are much better than the talent around them. And so now they're both on the Panthers. And, for Robinson, I really feel like when you get a player of his kind of athletic prowess, there's a lot you can do. I don't think he's super like instinctual, but he has those ball skills. And he's such a, I expect him kind of to be brought along slowly. I think the experience, he's a little bit more experienced. I wish the XFL season had been cut short. I think he would have been even better to just get a couple more games under his belt, because you saw him kind of improve even through that XFL season at reading offenses, at reacting to passes, at reading quarterback's eyes. So, I think when you have a guy that's this big, this athletic, this fast, can intercept passes, I mean, the upside is through the roof. If you told me in 5 years Kenny Robinson's one of the best safeties in the NFL, I wouldn't be overly surprised. He has that kind of potential. If you told me he was out of the NFL in 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's very possible. So, I think this is a swing for the fences. I think he'll probably start on special teams. I think he's going to be a really good special teams player. But another guy, if you can coach this up, I mean, the upside's tremendous.
Well, and it kind of sounds like he's got a good head on his shoulders too. He had that article that he wrote for the Players Tribune that was real popular. He had 7 interceptions in college, in 2 years in college, a ton of return yards. So it looks like when he gets the ball, he's going after it. He's got a nose for the end zone, which is great. He had 21 tackles in 5 games with 2 interceptions and a sack in the XFL. That's great. You kind of wonder if where he's drafted, if the XFL was still going on and, we didn't have the COVID-19 here happening. So maybe we can thank COVID-19 for him being available at the time that he was. The Panthers took him. Shoot, I'm just pulling strings here. But anyway, I appreciate the insight and your opinion on him. Definitely looking forward to some of these players, especially I already mentioned Jeremy Chin, but Troy Pride and Kenny Robinson kind of coming into their own with some coaching and some development. It looks like Matt Rule and Phil Snow, and if you want to throw Marty Herney in there as well, are doing a good job of finding players that I think that fits Matt Rule's in this case his defense, but his team, his plan. So we've got 2 other players left that were drafted, and that's Bravion Roy, the defensive tackle out of Baylor, that, of course, Matt Rule is familiar with, and Stanley Thomas Oliver, the third, a cornerback out of where was he? Florida International, maybe? Is that what yes, Florida International. Yeah. So if we could kind of lump those 2 together, I'm not sure what kind of upside we're talking about here. It seems like sometimes these picks, they become a familiar in camp, and then they kind of struggle to kind of make it. But what can we expect out of these 2?
I'll say I really like Bravion Roy. I did not think he would be drafted. But I thought he should be. He was one of those players I graded in the late 5th, early 6th round. I was like, I don't think NFL teams are going to take him. Like he just looks weird. He looks like he's some fat guy that should be sitting on the couch and eating Doritos. And it's like he's just got this weird proportions. Is he short, stumpy arms? But dude, every time I really like James Lynch and Baylor. Every time I put him on, I was like, man, this other defensive tackle, this other big guy's really good. He's like a dancing bear, man. I mean, he moves those feet, and he's just like this giant Papa Bear just moving around, and you just don't expect that athleticism out of this guy. So I think there's upside. Obviously, already being in Phil Snow's system, he kind of played more of that nose tackle role. And so to me, it almost seems like this is kind of the backup to Derrick Brown. Like this is the guy you want to develop to be the backup to him. And if I had to guess, I'd say he's probably going to outperform his draft position. I don't think he'll be one of those guys that goes away. I think he'll be one of those guys that just is on the roster for a while and he never really does much, but he's always there. And when he has to plug and play, you're not going to lose a ton. You may not get the big impact. I mean, you go back and watch him against Oklahoma, against Georgia. He was making plays in the backfield, tackling running backs, big time schools. I'm excited about him. Stanley Thomas Oliver, not as excited about. He's a player I think is going to be practice squad. He was a receiver 2 years ago. Recently made the cornerback conversion, and his thing was ball skills. He's good at high pointing a football. He's good at being a receiver, playing corner. So I think he's a practice squad guy. Try to bring him up and see if you can can develop him into something, and maybe it can come.
Sure. Yeah, and it's one of these we'll see kind of guys. Congrats, you made the team. Now go earn it, right? But getting back to Bravion Roy a little bit, I'm looking at his college stats, and like you said, he's kind of the guy on the couch eating Doritos. Hopefully, he's not watching or gets wind of this. But you know what, though, for a defensive tackle, if you're a space eater like that, and if you can put a little bit of push in your game, I mean, he had 5.5 sacks last year, 13 tackles for a loss. That's pretty good. I mean, he's doing something right. And if you have a niche, you have a specific role. I can see that the Panthers have had players like that in the past, and it sounds like he fits that role. So those are the draft picks. Are there any undrafted free agents that were signed by the Panthers that you have any? I don't want to say interest, but does anyone raise an eyebrow for you? Or are you not prepared to answer that?
Yeah,
honestly, I don't really know all of them myself.
Yeah, no, I mean it's I think they actually signed a couple decent receivers that I like, if I remember correctly. Or one Trevante Heights from TCU was kind of the second receiver at TCU. So I liked him. I thought he was a player that would be underrated. And then Omar Bayliss from Arkansas State's probably the big one that, ton of production there, really soft hands, nice route runner. He was a player I thought could sneak into the draft, that he was a possibility. So I like that pickup. And then Brandon Bowen, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, I think could develop into a reserve. So I actually think they did a pretty good job in undrafted free agency. There's a couple other names that stick out, but there are always a couple of those guys that make the team, right? So it's definitely a place to find some players.
That's right. And who knows? You never know. I mean, there's players all over the place that were undrafted free agents that are doing well in the league. It may not be like complete stars, but they're role players. So let's talk about the NFC South a little bit here. In addition to Carolina, of course, there's a murderer's row of quarterbacks between Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Matt Ryan, and then there's Teddy Bridgewater, right? And the Panthers. But from a good sense here, you got to think of the rebuild. In a couple of years, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Tampa, they're all going to have new quarterbacks that are not currently on the team right now. And, the Panthers are kind of positioning themselves for a run in the NFC South. So we're looking ahead to the future. But I do want to take a look at their current situation and look at some of the draft picks that they had. And is there anyone that we really need to be worried about here as a Panthers fan? Not necessarily worried about, but made aware of, right? So Let's start with Atlanta. Their first pick was cornerback AJ Terrell out of Clemson. Then they went with Marlon Davidson, the defensive end out of Auburn, and then Matt Hennessy, who I'm sure Matt Rule knows pretty well, a center out of Temple. What should we know about those three? It seems like, and I only picked three here because those are probably the top ones for Atlanta. But anything that we should be concerned about here as Panthers fans?
Honestly, I don't think Atlanta had the best draft. It seemed like they were trying to move up for one of the top two corners. I don't think AJ Terrell is going to be a giant issue. I don't think he's going to be one of those guys that turns into a stud corner. I actually think if he ends up getting matched against DJ Moore, I think AJ Terrell is going to have a lot of problems. I think he plays kind of stiff and slow. I like the other two picks. I think Marlon Davidson could really develop into something in that system. I think Hennessy's a future starter. So, building those trenches isn't always a bad idea. But I think Atlanta's secondary is still going to be pretty susceptible.
Yeah, and they don't have Desmond Trufant anymore. He was with Detroit, so that's a good sign. All right, let's take a look at New Orleans. They drafted a center, even though didn't they draft one last year, Eric McCoy? Or did they sign him? What was this? Is he a rookie? I don't even recall. Yeah,
they drafted him last year. Now, Cesar Ruiz, both those guys can play guard or center. So I'm interested to see how they kind of move around. But I'm sure both of them will start.
Yeah, so you got Cesar Ruiz from Michigan, Zach Bond, who, of course, any Wisconsin edge rusher you kind of tend to think about a little bit more. And they also got Adam Troutman, a tight end from a fantasy perspective, people are probably thinking, fantasy tight end on New Orleans. Okay, do tell. What can you talk to us a little bit about, especially Troutman from a fantasy sense, but Zach Vaughn, is he anything close to some of these other Wisconsin Badger edge rushers?
Yeah, I thought the Saints killed the draft. I think all three of these guys are future starters for the team. I Vaughn is a mid-first rounder. He has that kind of talent. Like he's just a violent dude with good athletic ability that can put his hand down, hand up. Ruiz is rock solid. I think if they play him at guard, he'll be good. He can pull. And then I really like Troutman. I got kind of cued into him, and you throw on some Dayton Flyers tape, and he's just leaping over guys, like jumping over players. Is very clearly just dominating at that level. And then the Senior Bowl, he performed really well from day one. Usually the small school guys take a couple days, but he ramped it up really quickly and was right in there. So I think Jared Cook's got one more year, and then Adam Troutman's going to be the weapon that you'll have to be a little bit scared of.
Sure. Right. Well, it's always good to be aware of our competition in the division and knowing who they have. Let's move on to Tampa, the Tom Brady Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't even want to go there right now. I just kind of hope that, his quarterback ranking in terms of fantasy is pretty much his jersey number. So Tampa went with a very popular offensive tackle, Tristan Wirfs, and some people think that he was arguably the better tackle here in the draft out of all of what did they have, 6, I think, that went in the first round. Yeah. And then safety Antoine Winfield Jr., and then the running back Keyshawn Vaughn, which a lot of people were kind of surprised about. I thought they would kind of take a chance at a blue chip running back in the second round, but they decided to go safety. I think there was at least maybe all of them except for Clyde Edwards-Helaire that was available at the time.
I think Jonathan Taylor was gone, but they...
Oh, was Taylor gone? Okay. But still, they could have had DeAndre Swift. But anyhow, so talk a little bit about these picks, especially some of these positional players, right? Like Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs is really good. I think the reason he maybe fell a little bit was he doesn't have as much starting experience as Andrew Thomas and the others. So you're projecting a little bit more with him, but super athletic, hard-nosed player. I think he's going to be a problem. I had Antoine Winfield as my top-rated safety.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think he has such good ball skills, such a good tackler. It sucks to compare him to his dad, right? but it's the same bloodlines. Yeah. You gotta take what you can get. I think the Keyshawn Vaughn pick was a little bit of a reach. I like Keyshawn Vaughn. He's a tough running back, multiple years of production. But he's very high cut. He plays really high and is not as fast as maybe his 40 time was or as quick as that. So I'm interested to see how they use him, if he really can win that job. I don't know if that's guaranteed, not that they have a ton of competition, but I'll be interested to see for him. But I do like Tyler Johnson. They drafted the receiver from Minnesota later. I think he could fill that slot position that's kind of open for competition. Just what you need is another slot receiver for Tom Brady may not be good for the Panthers, I guess.
Yeah, especially with the secondary that the Panthers have. Although things have improved since a week ago.
Yeah, right.
So that's a big plus, and we're hoping for 7 or 8 wins this year. That's just kind of where we're at in terms of reaching for the fences, perhaps. But all right, well, you know what? We're pretty much running low on time here, but I definitely wanted to thank you for coming on and for talking to me and us about these players. We're excited for that here with Carolina. Is there any let me just ask you this: is there any particular player that you thought was drafted into, and this could be for not just for Carolina but for any team, right? Any specific player that was drafted into a spot that's absolutely perfect for his ability or his characteristics, or as far as coaching, anything like that? Is there a player that sticks out to you as, hey, this guy, look out?
One sticks out to me that I actually had on my mock draft because I was like, this is a perfect fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it happened was Patrick Queen to Baltimore.
Yes.
I think that's such a perfect player, right? He'll have a big year of production, is athletic, good pass rusher, but man, he is tough as nails and he's going to run after you and chase down running backs. And it's like, man, Baltimore just drafts these guys, and they're not always, Hall of Famers or these great players recently, but you play them, and that cohesive unit is just tough. And I think Patrick Queen's just going to be tough. That was the one I was like, oh man, and I think the AFC North in general just got a lot tougher, all four teams. But I think building that defense, Queen's going to be someone's going to wreck up there.
That's a good call, especially with the fit. Losing CJ Mosley, of course, they didn't really have that middle linebacker to come in and be that guy. And I totally see Patrick Queen being a great fit there. I don't know if it pains me to say, because I'm not like a Steelers fan who is anti-Baltimore, right? But Baltimore's always been a team where, I respect the hell out of that franchise. They do things really well. And they always seem to draft well. And Ozzie Newsome has definitely passed that torch on pretty well. So, yeah, I would agree with you there. All right. Well, that's about all the time that we have. I do want to say, thanks for Shane for coming on. You can reach him on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. And also at fakepigskin.com, DraftSite, and SteelCityInsider. Shane, it was a pleasure. Thanks for coming on board. And for the people who are listening, watching this, if you enjoyed this, I'm thankful. This show and this channel is all about the Panthers fans and building that fan base. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw, what you heard. If you did, please feel free to go ahead and click subscribe so you can get more of our content. And I look forward to bringing to you more guests like Shane. As well as other people in Panthers Nation that we can talk more about the team and just kind of discuss different things. So thanks again so much, Shane. Appreciate you being on, and have a great evening.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.